looking for answers. America's top diplomat meets with Saudi leaders over the disappearance and alleged killing of a U.S.-based journalist. The fight for the unborn. Correspondent Jason Calvi continues his conversation with a Senate candidate in Missouri. The female vote. Why some are demanding a greater participation in a synod document. We'll have analysis from Rome. And saintly celebrations, honors for one of the church's newest canonized people in the largest archdiocese in the U.S. On EWTN News Nightly for Tuesday, October 16th, 2018. Good evening from Washington, D.C., and thank you to those of you joining us from around the world for news from a Catholic perspective. I'm Lauren Ashburn. Police in Turkey say they are one step closer to figuring out what happened to a missing Saudi journalist. The country's president says investigators found evidence a prominent contributor to the Washington Post was killed while inside the Saudi consulate in Istanbul. Correspondent Wyatt Goolsby joins us with details. Good evening, Wyatt.
Good evening, Lauren. Investigators in Turkey are also taking a look at Saudi consul's personal residence tonight. In the midst of the investigation, the Saudi diplomat himself has left Turkey, flying back to Saudi Arabia. That's where Secretary of State Mike Pompeo is looking for answers in the case of the missing journalist Jamal Khashoggi. Secretary Pompeo not wasting any time after his arrival in Riyadh, shaking hands with Saudi Arabia's foreign affairs minister before traveling to a royal palace where King Salman greeted him. America's top diplomat thanking the king for accepting his visit on behalf of President Trump.
We're working very close with Saudi Arabia and with Turkey, and they're working together to figure out what happened.
The president sending the Secretary of State to Saudi Arabia comes just 2 weeks after Jamal Khashoggi was last seen entering the Saudi consulate to pick up some paperwork and never came out. World leaders, including the United Nations Human Rights Commission, have called for lifting of any immunity at the consulate so that investigators can do a full search.
It seems very probable some crime or other has been committed. We all need to know what it was.
Turkey's president blames Saudi Arabia, accusing the Saudi government of having the 60-year-old murdered. Pompeo met with Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, who rejects Turkey's allegations. Khashoggi wrote critically about the prince as a contributor for the Washington Post while living in the United States. The prince stressing the U.S.-Saudi alliance today, telling Pompeo, "We are strong and old allies." James Carafano, a national security expert, notes the growing rift between Turkey and Saudi Arabia. He says it's vital the United States plays a leadership role in the Middle East.
The United States has a specific interest in that peace and stability in the Middle East is critical. And in many respects, the United States is the only respected power that has the capacity and the capability, in a sense, to mitigate these contentious relationships.
Some media reports suggest Khashoggi may have been killed during a botched interrogation inside the Saudi consulate, but officials have not confirmed that. Secretary Mike Pompeo will likely learn more tomorrow. That's when he travels to Turkey to meet with their foreign minister about the investigation. He's also welcoming Turkey's decision to release evangelical pastor Andrew Brunson, who is back home in the United States. Lauren?
Wyatt Goolsby reporting. Thank you, Wyatt. We continue our coverage of our exclusive Catholic in America poll. With just 3 weeks until the midterm election, the battle for pro-life votes is in full swing. And it's an issue of importance in the Midwest. When Midwest Catholics were asked how concerned they are about abortion, 65% said concerned, while 35% said they were not concerned. Capitol Hill correspondent Jason Calvi recently visited Missouri, a swing state, with a very close Senate race. Good evening, Jason.
Good evening, Lauren. NARAL Pro-Choice America is targeting vulnerable Republicans with a $1 million ad campaign. Now, Missouri is one of the few states in the country down to just one abortion clinic. Missouri Attorney General Josh Hawley is battling Democrat Claire McCaskill in this key Senate race.
1, 2, 3.
Ready? 1, 2, 3.
U.S. Senate candidate and Missouri Attorney General Josh Hawley defends his state's
pro-life laws. The Columbia abortion clinic was closed down after they found black mold inside some piping there.
Yes.
Now there's only one abortion clinic in Missouri. What does that mean for you as you're running for Senate as well?
Well, it means that we're enforcing our laws, and we have gone to court. We have 3 different lawsuits going on right now. The state of Missouri is being sued by pro-abortion groups. We're out there defending Missouri's laws. These are common sense regulations. They're health and safety regulations. They're regulations about the safety of women. They say that, abortion clinics ought to at least have the same standards as outpatient surgical centers. So they're pretty common sense stuff.
After an appeals court ruling upholding those laws, this Planned Parenthood clinic in Columbia, Missouri no longer does abortions. An answer to many prayers offered by these pro-lifers.
We feel that this is a novena. We have put in 9 years of hard work, prayer, fasting, community outreach, and God is rewarding his faithful servants.
And right now behind you, no abortions are taking place.
No abortions are taking place. None at all. Praise be to God.
But at the national level, the Senate has shot down a 20-week abortion ban twice, with the support of Hawley's opponent, Missouri Democrat Claire McCaskill. This race sprints to the finish line. With 21 more days to get out the vote, voters will soon decide who controls Congress. The McCaskill campaign repeatedly chose not to respond to our request to cover the senator on the campaign trail. Back here in D.C., the Supreme Court's 5-4 conservative majority is expected to look more favorably on state abortion restrictions. Planned Parenthood plans to expand hours, workers, and clinics in states where abortion is likely to stay, like Illinois. Lauren?
What other efforts is Planned Parenthood taking as a result of Justice Kavanaugh's Supreme Court confirmation?
Well, they do plan to work with the arts, music, fashion, movies, television, to reduce what they call abortion stigma. The pro-life group Susan B. Anthony List says this whole plan really shows that Planned Parenthood's main focus, their business, is abortion, not women's health.
Capitol Hill correspondent Jason Calvi. Thank you, Jason. Indiana is asking the U.S. Supreme Court to hear arguments about a 2016 abortion law signed by Vice President Mike Pence when he was Indiana's governor. The law bars women from having abortions based on gender, race, or disability. Federal courts have blocked it. The state's attorney general says a woman has the right to abort, but not the right to decide which child to bear. The Archdiocese of Washington releases the names of 31 priests credibly accused of sexual abuse. The charges date from 1948. The announcement comes just days after Pope Francis accepted the resignation of the head of the Archdiocese, Cardinal Donald Wuerl. He was under fire for his handling of clergy misconduct allegations. Nearly 2,000 Honduran immigrants are fleeing poverty and violence. The migrants are traveling through Central America as they attempt to reach the U.S. border. But President Trump is threatening to cut aid money to Honduras if they don't turn around. White House correspondent Mark Irons reports. Good evening, Mark.
Good evening, Lauren. It's the latest tough immigration talk we are hearing from the president. He has been vocal about his immigration policies recently, but in challenging opposition. So have U.S. courts and Catholic bishops.
A caravan of nearly 2,000 traveling migrants looking for a better life. They spent the night in Guatemala, still more than 1,000 miles from the U.S. Many attended Mass at a local Catholic basilica. Marvin Ramirez says the cost of electricity and health care and a lack of security is killing people in Honduras. But today, President Trump warns of the repercussions if the migrants don't turn back home. The United States has strongly informed the president of Honduras that if the large caravan of people heading to the U.S. is not stopped and brought back to Honduras, no more money or aid will be given to Honduras, effective immediately. Over the weekend, the president said he's doing whatever he can to get illegal immigration slowed down.
The country is doing so well economically and every other way that more people want to come in than ever before. So we have to be very strong.
The Trump administration placed an expiration date on how long immigrants from countries hurt by war or natural disasters can seek shelter in the U.S. It could put people from Sudan, Haiti, Nicaragua, and El Salvador at risk of deportation, but a California judge has blocked the administration's order. Catholic bishops also pushed back against the president's recent decision to allow a record low 30,000 refugees into the country. Bishop Joe S. Vasquez of Austin writes, "Resettlement in our country is a way through which we live out our gospel call to welcome the persecuted into our communities, individuals and families with no viable options to stay where they are or return home."
The president believes the creation of more jobs in the U.S. has created a need for people to fill those positions. He says we need people coming into the U.S., but he says he wants immigrants to come in legally and through a merit, skill-based system. Lauren?
White House correspondent Mark Irons. Thank you, Mark. Authorities in northern Mexico are investigating the death of a Catholic priest. Icmar Arturo Orta's body was found Friday. He was a priest in the Mexican state of Baja California. His death is being investigated as a homicide. More than 24 priests have been killed in Mexico since 2012. U.S. Defense Secretary James Mattis arrives in Vietnam. This is part of the Trump administration's effort to counter China's military presence by cozying up to smaller nations in the region. The secretary was scheduled to visit Beijing, but that trip was canceled amid rising tensions over trade and defense issues. 2 Chinese bishops who participated in the Synod on Youth have invited Pope Francis to visit their country as they return to China. It is the latest sign of improving relations between the Vatican and Beijing. Last month, the two reached a provisional agreement on the naming of bishops. This year marked the first time prelates from the communist country attended a Vatican synod. The bishops became the first Chinese bishops to attend a Vatican synod. Questions from reporters covering the Synod on Youth have focused on why women taking part in the meeting do not have the right to vote. Demand for greater participation in the Church's decision-making process has been a recurring theme during press briefings. The month-long gathering of bishops is in its 3rd week at the Vatican. Only bishops and a few priests are allowed to vote on the final document. Dr. Pia De Salini is Chancellor of the Diocese of Orange in California and joins us from our Rome Bureau. Welcome back to the program, Pia.
Hi, it's great to be back with you.
What do you make of this debate? Why can't women vote?
Well, I think we have to first of all remember what the Synod is. It's a meeting of bishops. There have been some exceptions in terms of religious brothers representing religious organizations, but it is by definition a meeting of bishops. I think if we want to talk about women having a role in decision making or in impacting the Church, I think we should probably be shifting the conversation to another direction.
What do you mean by that? What role do you think women should have in a synod?
I mean, I'm not sure that the Synod is the best vehicle even for the bishops. I'm not convinced that it's an effective means. Many people will say that the end document ends up looking a lot like the beginning document, the Instrumentum Laboris, the entire structure. You get about 300 bishops together who don't know each other. Most of them don't know each other. They don't speak the same language. They come from dramatically different parts of the world and situations. They are facing oftentimes dramatically different pastoral situations, and in a month they're supposed to come to consensus on a document. It's very, very difficult. I think that maybe we ought to be looking at something maybe where we start on a regional level, but when we talk specifically about women, you know, I'm not sure if we need something here in Rome, or maybe what we need to be doing is encouraging women to have greater roles in every aspect of society. And you may recall back in 2004, Cardinal Ratzinger, later Pope Benedict, wrote in the CDF document on the collaboration of men and women in society that women had a role in every aspect of society. And I have to say, quite honestly, when I look at who it is that...
Well, Pope Francis has spoken often about the need for a greater role for women in the Church, too. So what do you think that looks like from an authentically Catholic perspective?
Again, I think we have to be careful and not look at simply the formal church structures. The Church is broader than that, and it goes out into the world. I think it means women having a role in every aspect of society. Some of that will be directly in the Church, but I think we also have to consider the Church loosely, the broader sense of the Church, and again, women having influence in all of those aspects. I think if we're going to limit it to the Church, everybody's going to get very frustrated very quickly. There is not as much power in the Church, quite honestly, as I think a lot of people would like to think.
You say society, in greater role in society. What are you talking about specifically?
I mean, look at who shapes culture, who shapes opinion. Honestly, it is not the church in most cases that shapes culture or that shapes opinion. They are people, they are opinion makers. It's people that form media. It's people in economics, right, that set the economic priorities. There are so many ways in which our values are set. And frankly, the church is not it has not had the lead in that for a long time. So it seems to me that if we as Catholics want to promote the church, want to promote leadership for women in the church, I would be looking at all these other sectors in society that are truly having a greater impact on the culture.
Dr. Pia De Salini, Chancellor of the Diocese of Orange and Theological Advisor to its bishop. She's in Rome with the Notre Dame Center for Ethics and Culture. Thanks for joining us.
It's great to be with you, Lauren.
Coming up, splitting from Constantinople, why the Russian church is severing ties with the leader of the worldwide Orthodox community. One of the world's major religious denominations is facing a crisis. The Russian Orthodox Church has broken ties with the leader of the worldwide Orthodox community. The fight is being compared to the greatest Orthodox split since the schism with Catholicism in 1054. Why? The worldwide leader, Ecumenical Patriarch Bartholomew I, last week granted Ukrainian clerics their independence from Moscow. They had been under Russian leadership since the 1600s. Russia's Metropolitan Hilarion calls the decision, quote, lawless and canonically void, and says it might lead to a deep religious rift in Ukraine. Joining me now is Metropolitan Jonah Puffhausen, former Archbishop of Washington, Primate of the Orthodox Church in America, now serving in the jurisdiction, the Russian Orthodox Church outside of Russia. Metropolitan Jonah, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much.
What does this mean?
Basically, what it means is that there is a break in communion. There's not a full split, but there's a break in communion between the Russian Orthodox Church and the Church of Constantinople.
And what does that mean for the faithful?
Well, what it means in Russia is something that very different than what it means in America. In Russia, it means that Russians on vacation in Turkey can't go to church and receive communion. In the United States, it means that members of the Russian Orthodox Church and members of the Greek Orthodox Church aren't supposed to go to church together. And that's a huge thing in America, because we have, even though we may go to different churches with different traditions, we know and love one another.
Of course.
Yeah.
Pope Francis in 2016 memorably met with Moscow's Patriarch Kirill. It was the first meeting between the leaders of the two churches in nearly 1,000 years. Will this situation affect the Moscow-Vatican relationship?
My guess is that it will not. One of the big questions in this whole issue is the relationship of the Ukrainian Catholic Church to the Orthodox community in Ukraine. I know there have been problems between the Vatican and the Ukrainian Catholic Church. And there are certainly problems between the various Orthodox communities in Ukraine, which is what this is all about. And how it will promote unity is something unknown at this point. But the relationship between Rome and Moscow and the rest of the Orthodox Church remains very positive.
Solid. Metropolitan Jonah Puffhausen, former Archbishop of Washington, Primate of the Orthodox Church in America, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Up next, we'll return to Rome to hear from a synod participant on the importance of mentorship in the church and celebrating St. Oscar Romero. The key to keeping young Catholics in the church is spiritual direction, so says one young delegate participating in the Synod on Youth. In his speech, Jonathan Lewis challenged the bishops. He said, "I would like to begin with a question. How many young people do you know by name? We're now joined by Jonathan, one of 5 American youth delegates Pope Francis invited to the Synod. He is Assistant Secretary of Pastoral Ministry for the Archdiocese of Washington and an old friend. Welcome to the program, Jonathan.
Thanks, Lauren. Really happy to be with you.
Bishop Barron of Los Angeles said he liked your challenge. What was your point in doing this?
So every auditor has the opportunity to speak to the whole Synod Hall once. And the first question that I asked in my address was to ask the bishops, and by extension, really all of us, how many young people do you know by name?
And so what did they say?
Well, I didn't have a chance to hear them in the Synod Hall, but afterwards I had a number of people coming up to me, some sort of proudly saying that because of the work they do with young people, they did in fact know some. But I think many sort of taking that question, which was meant to be a bit piercing, to heart. In my experience working with people in ministry, it's often a helpful examination of conscience that we can easily talk about young people as a big group or category, but at the end of the day, it's most important that we call people by name and get to know them by name, to know how to best respond through a way of personal accompaniment.
You mentioned the importance of having spiritual mentors. Why is it important to have a mentor, especially for kids growing up in the church, young adults?
Well, spiritual mentorship is important because it's what Jesus did. He didn't, gather hundreds of people into one place every single week. Rather, he invited people one-on-one, calling them by name, and called them to follow him and to walk with him on a journey. The image that's come up continuously throughout this month, these last couple weeks of this month, is the image of the road to Emmaus, where Jesus walked with the 2 disciples on the way. And it was in that walk on the way that they learned about their faith. And I think, too, as I look at my life, and I think as all of us can reflect on our own journeys of faith, whether when we were youth or young adults, we had people with us on the way in our own journey, whether it was someone at our parish, someone at a college or university, a layperson or a priest, someone in our family, peer, or someone older than us. We all need people to walk with us. I think we know that one of the biggest lies we're told is that we can do everything ourselves.
Right.
And it's just as true in the spiritual life, that we need people to get to know us by name and to walk with us one-on-one.
We're a little more than halfway through the Synod, and there are 36 young people who are actually taking part. What happens when they go home? What are they going to take away?
Well, that's a bit of the great adventure of the synodal process, right? We're spending this time listening and dialoguing, and we're just now in this 3rd week, in the 3rd phase of the Synod process, which is acting, or beginning to reflect upon where do we go from here. And so already in the Synod Hall, there have been different proposals by bishops and lay people. Some people saying maybe the Vatican should open an office for young people, or dioceses should host a similar synodal type gathering locally where priests and lay people could talk together in a similar culture of listening. I think that is sort of the great mystery of what does happen. I think that's the most important thing, though, that something does happen. I think that we'll be a sign of inauthenticity to young people if we gather for a month, talk a lot, maybe put out a document, but don't do anything about it. Young people want to see boots on the ground. They want to see a difference being made.
Jonathan Lewis, Assistant Secretary of Pastoral Ministry for the Archdiocese of Washington. So happy you're there representing us. Thanks, Jonathan.
Thank you very much.
Thousands of Catholics gathered Sunday at the Archdiocese of Los Angeles to celebrate the canonization of now Saint Oscar Romero. Salvadorans performed traditional dances. Romero's recorded homilies and speeches were heard over the loudspeakers. A diocesan spokeswoman said the Archdiocese says it was one of the most joyful masses she's ever seen. And the Archdiocese there serves nearly 200,000 Catholics from El Salvador. That does it for all of us here at EWTN News Nightly. To all of you around the world, thank you for watching. I'm Lauren Ashburn. Let's keep in touch online. Follow me at Lauren Ashburn on Twitter and Lauren Ashburn EWTN on Facebook. Good night, and God bless you.